$13.75. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. We are continuing the study of Judges. Today we're in chapter 1. We might talk a little bit about chapter 2, but chapter 1 is important because it kind of sets up the rest of the book. Here's the outline. Chapter 1 is going to be a mixture of success and failure. They succeed in taking a portion of the land, but they fail in not taking all of it, right? So the book of Judges begins with a series of victories and defeats that take place after the death of Joshua, right? Under Joshua, they take the majority of the land, but there's still some more work to be had, right? The boundary lines for the 12 tribes of Israel have been drawn. They say, okay, this tribe gets this land, this tribe gets this land, this tribe gets this land. But there are still some foreign nations in those lands. And so they like I said, they take a big portion of it, but even Joshua says, hey, when I pass, you have some more work to do. You still got to take some of this land, right? Just because it's been kind of given to them doesn't mean that they possess it. So Joshua was an old man, and the Lord said to Joshua, this is Joshua 13:1, he said, "You are old, advanced in years, and there remains very much land yet to be possessed." So the people of Israel, they own all the land in God's eyes, but it's just a matter of they don't possess it yet. They don't get to enjoy all of it yet because they still have to eliminate the foreign people who live there, right? So here's some maps. So for me, whenever I'm reading things like about, this tribe conquered this city, and these peoples, honestly, it's hard for me to remember that stuff. It's hard for me to get interested in that stuff unless I have a map, right? So I went and got some maps to help us actually visualize what we're talking about, right? So the nation of Israel was promised this land. And if you can't see all the words, don't worry. I'll tell you what's important on the map. Abraham was promised to receive this land, and his descendants would receive it after they returned from Egypt, right? The land didn't just sit there empty in the meantime, right? The inhabitants in the land, and there were inhabitants in the land, and one of God's people's responsibilities were to eliminate the natives in the land. So each of these nations, let me see. Does this work? That's Ammon right there. This is Moab, this is Edom, this is the Canaanites, this is the Amalekites, this is the Phoenicians or the Philistines, this is the Amorites. So none of these are the nation of Israel. This is before Israel comes in and takes it all. So it's not like super full, but there's people there. Right? You have the Phoenicians, the Canaanites, the Amalekites, the Amorites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Edomites, right? So one of the responsibilities of God's people was to take it. It was to defeat all these people. Okay. Next. Is that you or me? Oh, okay. There we go. And so this is the land before they take it, and this is what God is giving them, right? These are the tribes, right? So these are the 12 tribes, if you'll notice, like at the bottom here, you got Judah and Simeon, Manasseh, Asher, Benjamin, Dan, Gad, Reuben. So this is the land that God says, this is yours. God said, this is your land. You can have it. But again, there are people who live inside it, and they got to clear it out in order to get the land, right? So God offered, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, a little bit on the east side of the river. But again, they had to go to war to take it. And under Joshua, they do quite a bit. So this is under Joshua what they do. So they're going to come up from the east side, and they're going to cross the river here. And they're going to have a central campaign, right, where they go to war here. And then they're going to divide up, and some of them are going to go north, and some of them are going to go south. So they come in through the side, right here from the east, on the east side of the river, come over, they go north, and they go south. And they have a good amount. I forget how long Joshua takes. I think Joshua takes maybe about 25 years, and the campaign, the war, kind of lasts about 7 years. So for about 7 years, they're taking a whole bunch of land. But it's not complete. It's not total. There's still more to be done. So this is the land they took. So this middle land right here that's kind of greenish yellow, this is Israel. And all these around them are still the foreign nations. So they really haven't taken. Right, so this is what they're supposed to have, and this is what they have in the book of Judges. Right? So they don't have everything they're supposed to have. These guys really aren't in the way, but these guys are definitely in the way. This is all supposed to be Israel's land, and they haven't taken it yet. In the book of Judges, they don't eliminate the nations that they're supposed to. And instead, they coexist with the nations. And honestly, that's going to be the biggest source of trouble for them. They're surrounded by other nations that have wicked cultures, pagan idols, and throughout the book of Judges, that's the thorn in their side. And God's going to say as much. Right? God says, why didn't you take out these people? You know what? I'm going to leave these people there to test you and to cause you trouble. Maybe then you'll learn. Right? And so in the book of Judges, you see the struggle there. So get this map in your mind, right? Israel's right here, and they are surrounded by other nations that they should have wiped out. So as we approach the book of Judges, we'll kind of see that. A little bit about these nations, right? This was a very diverse region. You have the Perizzites, Jebusites, Amorites, Philistines, Sidonians, Hivites, Hittites. There are so many different types of people, and they're tribes, right? They're not real big, huge kingdoms. Some of them get to that size, but a lot of them are just smaller, 1,000 people, 10,000 people over here, maybe 50,000 people over here. And a lot of these peoples you read about in the book of Judges, archaeologically, we don't have much information on them. Why? Because they're small and it's hard and they didn't really leave much of a trace, right? But they're very diverse. You're going to read about how they have their kings. And the word king is kind of used a little loosely in our kind of idea. Like I said, if you have a family that grows to the size of, a couple thousand, and the person who's in charge, like the patriarch, he's going to be called a king, right? In our mind, you wouldn't call, someone who's in charge of 5,000 people a king, but that's the word that they use. You're going to have the Philistines, who at one point have this confederation of 5 cities. You're going to have outside groups and inside groups. There's going to be a lot of instability. One of the things I was learning about this week is that the book of Judges is in the transition period between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. So when we look back at archaeology and we look at the kind of tools that they used, predominantly in the Bronze Age, they used bronze, which is a mixture of copper and tin, right? That was the technology at the time, right? A lot of their swords, a lot of their wheels, a lot of their farming equipment was made from bronze. And that required copper they could get fairly close, but tin had to be imported in. It took trade to get tin in, right? But then the technology of iron came about. Iron is a lot stronger than bronze, so you got a soldier with a bronze sword and a soldier with an iron sword. Odds are the soldier with an iron sword is going to win. And we're going to see that in this chapter, that there's one place that the nation of Israel, or the tribe of, I think it's Judah, wasn't able to take because they had iron chariots. And in that transition period, whenever the technology of iron came about, the kingdoms built on bronze were weakened. So you had, 2 or 3 nations that were extremely strong because they had the best technology, because they were cranking out bronze like nobody's business. And the biggest one that I'm thinking of is Egypt. Egypt was extremely strong at this period. Was extremely strong at this period because they had the power of bronze and they had tin coming in. But then iron came around, and as iron came about, it disrupted trade routes. Egypt, who's depending on tin being imported, their trade route gets cut off. They're not able to crank out bronze. If you're not able to make metal for your weapons or for your tools, your nation doesn't do as well. So Egypt goes from being the top to being extremely weak. And when there is no nation that's in charge of everything, all the small nations tend to fight more, right? When there's one big nation, and the big nation says, no, I'm in charge, you guys get along and just pay me, right? Then there's a little bit of peace, right? But when there's no one person who's in charge of everything, things are a lot more chaotic, and every nation is trying to be the big guy, right? Every nation is trying to be the big nation, right? And so this is a transition period from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. It happens around 1200 BC, and the book of Judges goes from 1300 to about 1000 BC. So right in the middle, maybe around the time of Gideon, is where that big transition occurs, and we're seeing a little bit of this right now. I say all of this to say it's an extremely chaotic period, where no one is really in charge and all the small nations can do as they see fit, and some of the small nations are going to try to be the new big dogs in town. We're going to see that hugely with Samson and the Philistines, right? So the period at this time is extremely chaotic. It's a diverse group around the nation of Israel. Religiously, they're extremely diverse. The Israelites were in Egypt, and that was a polytheistic environment where they believed all different types of pagan gods. And then the next generation, here they come into Canaan, into the Promised Land, and now again they're surrounded by polytheistic nations, right? They're supposed to be a monotheistic faith. They believe in one God, but they're surrounded by countries that have multiple gods. And so that's going to be a challenge for them. So 3 times in the first 2 chapters, God speaks. The first is a directive, chapter 1, verse 2. The second is an accusation, chapter 2, verse 1 to 3. And the third is a decree, chapter 2, verse 20 to 22. And we'll get to the first 2. So here's how the book of Judges opens up. After the death of Joshua, the people of Israel inquired to the Lord, "Who shall go up for us against the Canaanites to fight against them?" The Lord said, "Judah shall go up. Behold, I have given the land into his hand." And Judah said to Simeon his brother, "Come up with me into the territory allotted to me, that we might fight against the Canaanites. And I likewise will go with you into the territory allotted to you." So Simeon went with him. Then Judah went up, and the Lord gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand, and they defeated 10,000 of them at Bezek. So this is how it starts off. It starts off on a really good note, because this is after Joshua passed, and the people of God said, "Okay, who's going to fight next?" Right? We're clearing out the land. Who's going to fight next? And God says, "Okay, well, the nation of Judah, or the tribe of Judah, is going to go fight these specific people." And the tribe of Judah says, "Okay," and asks Simeon, the tribe Simeon, to come along with them. They come along and they defeat 10,000 of them, which is pretty impressive, right? This is where Judah and Simeon are located. They are the southernmost nations. Judah kind of has all of this land. Simeon is spread throughout Judah. Simeon really doesn't have much of a tribal identity. They're kind of melded into the tribe of Judah. When the nation splits with these in the north and Judah, Benjamin, Simeon's going to stick around mostly to the southern. So Simeon is kind of melded into Judah and spread throughout their land, right? So it makes sense that if the people of Judah are going to go, the people of Simeon are asked to go with them because they live in the same land, right? Now, the Canaanites, this is important. So we're talking about the land of Canaan. That's the name of the land before Israel gets to it. The Canaanites, when you see that word, it can refer to one of two things. One, it can just refer to anyone who lives in the Canaan land, right? Like when I was living in Texas, I was a Texan, right? You guys are Hoosiers. Well, I guess I'm a Hoosier too, right? This is you know, in my heart, I'm a Texan. Sorry. Where you live, that's just kind of what you are. But it also refers to a second group. It's a specific ethnic group. You know, has to do with their lineage. What kind of, you can be an Asian and not live in Asia. You know what I mean? So in this instance, talking about this group, it's probably referring to an ethnic group because he says Canaanites, but then he specifically says Canaanites and Perizzites. Perizzites is probably a specific group, like a specific tribe, maybe a specific ethnic group that has its own lineage in the land. So when we're talking about the Canaanites, a couple things. The Canaanites is not one nation, right? It's a broad group. It's kind of like saying Europeans, right? Europe is not one nation, right? But so there are a bunch of small city-states, and a city-state is when a city is its own government, right? A nation that's built on a city, right? It's not the surrounding area, it's just that city. That city is its own nation. So it's a bunch of small, different city-states. One thing that you probably know, I think the most common pagan god mentioned in the Bible is Baal, right? He's a storm fertility god. He supposedly had control over the weather, and when you live in an agrarian society focused on agriculture, that's extremely, extremely important. So when you worshiped Baal, you were promised good weather. Good weather meant good crops. Good crops meant nobody went hungry, right? It means you had prosperity. But Baal was not just one specific god. In their language, that meant Lord or Master. So there's that specific Baal god, but then you'd have other nations who had their own version of Baal, right? So when you say Baal, you're usually referring to the Canaan's version, but there's some verses that say the Israelites worship the Baals, right, in plural, because there are different regional versions. And that's kind of what polytheism does. It doesn't make much sense to us, but in polytheism, you can take a god from another nation and add it to your own list, and you can kind of customize them as you want. That's what polytheism does, right? It sounds silly to us, but it wasn't silly to them. So just a little bit of background as we're talking about the Canaanites, because they're going to keep coming up all throughout, all the way up to the New Testament, right? So, moving forward, there's a common pattern in our Bible of how battles are described. First, you say, okay, this is the battle. You say which side won. You say what the casualties on the defeated side are. And then you give us a glimpse into the war, right? And that's what happens here. They found Adonibezek at Bezek and fought against him and defeated the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Adonibezek fled, and they pursued him and caught him and cut off his thumbs and his big toes. And Adonibezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and their big toes cut off used to pick up scraps under my table. As I have done, so God has repaid me. And they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. And the men of Judah fought against Jerusalem and captured it and struck it with the edge of the sword and set the city on fire. So this is the leader of the tribe that they're fighting against, Adonibezek, which is a title meaning Lord of Bezek. Bezek is the town or the tribe. And There are lots of times when the book of Judges is going to skim over the details. So when the book of Judges kind of narrows in on a specific thing, and it does it with purpose, right? When the book of Judges gives you details, you're supposed to stop and ask, why do we need to know this? So here, why did God record this instance where Adonibezek had his thumbs and toes cut off, and he himself says, I've done this to 70 other kings at my table, and now it's being done to me by God? Why? What's the purpose in recording this? Thoughts? This is the first glimpse we get into the people that, in this book, this is the first glimpse we get into the people that the nation of Israel are fighting against. Tom?
I think what's happening here is that they're doing what the Canaanites are doing. It seems clear they're following not only the cultures but also the war practices that the Canaanites have been doing.
Mm-hmm.
That if somebody loses their toes, big toes and thumbs, it really disables a person.
Mm-hmm.
Among other things, but God didn't want disabled; He wanted elimination,
Right.
of the bad culture and evil, and they're just playing along. They're just doing what the Canaanites are doing.
Right. That's a great point. Yeah. Yeah, Bob?
I mean, it kind of shows that it justifies what the Israelites are doing because they're being the judges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Judging through them.
That's a great point. Yeah. Yeah, I think both had really good points. Bob said, it kind of shows that they're justified in doing this. When God eliminates a society, He only eliminates unjust societies, right? And you learn that with God in Lot and Sodom, right? Abraham said, would you destroy the nation if so many righteous were there? And God says, well, go ahead and try and find that many righteous people. And that really gives us the indication that when God eliminates a society, it's because He's judged that society to be bad, right? And so in books like Joshua and Judges, where the nation of Israel are going and destroying societies, you're like, how can this be just? Well, here's a glimpse into what this society did. This king had 70 other kings, right? That means this guy is a warmonger. He went to war at least 70 times, right? So this guy is a warmonger. That gives you a glimpse into who the Canaanites are. Not good people, right? In addition, as to what Tom said, the nation of Israel has been told, wipe out the people, don't leave them around. And yet, this guy's alive. What's going on here? And not only that, they're treating this man how he treated others. And yeah, eye for an eye, that is kind of just punishment, but that's not what God said to do. They're adopting what he did. Honestly, when you remove someone's thumbs and big toes, they pretty much cannot walk well, and they definitely can't. They're defenseless, right? In 5th grade, I remember learning about how important the thumb was, and my teacher, she glued our thumbs to our hands, and she said, okay, now here's a football and throw it. And so each of us had to have a turn where we tried to pick up, it was a small football, so we had to pick up a football and try to toss it. And that taught us how important the thumb is. When you remove someone's thumb, there's not much they can do. They're extremely debilitated. They can't pick up a sword. When you remove someone's toes, big toes, they can't run, right? They can hobble, but they can't run. And so here, this isn't so much of obeying God as it is adopting the practices of the wicked nations around them and using humiliation, right? So this already is not the best start, is it? So, I think this is an important glimpse into seeing, okay, Israel already isn't doing that great, but also when they go to destroy the Canaanites, you need to understand what kind of people we're talking about. Now, in this story, you have this story of Caleb and Othniel. I'm going to skip over it for now. There's not too much to look at it. So Othniel is our first judge, and he is the nephew of Caleb. Caleb says, hey, if somebody captures this town, they can have the town and my daughter. Caleb's nephew thinks to himself, I want to marry my cousin. And back then it wasn't that weird. So he captures the town, he gets the daughter. The daughter asks Caleb, says, hey, in addition to that land, can I also get this land with the water in it? And Caleb says, sure. So there's not too much to get there. We might come back to it whenever we talk about Othniel a little bit more, because he is our first judge. So in this section, like I said, I gave maps because none of this really makes a difference. None of this sticks in my mind unless I have a map, right? So they start, and you can read this in the chapter. They start with Jerusalem. This is where they take. So they're going to war. They're going to war, right? And they're going to go down this route, right? They start with Jerusalem. So this is the natural region of Canaan, just so you know. Right here, bunch of hills. Here is desert. This is the Dead Sea. The desert is down here at Negev, but it reaches up on the west side of the Dead Sea, right? And then so around the hills, you got foothills and you got plains right here. And this is going to be important because sometimes the book of Judges mentions hill countries, plains, deserts, foothills. So if you don't know this is just going to be important. Just understand, the middle is country, around it is foothills and plains. The desert comes along the Dead Sea right here. So this is the direction that they're going, and you can read this in this chapter. They go from Jerusalem, and they start going down. They go to Hebron, Debir, they go to Arad. We have Moses' father-in-law's people decide that they're going to go from Jericho, which is around here, and they're going to settle here in Arad. And then they go up this direction, right? Gaza, Ashkelon, Ekron. They're going up the coast now. So they went down this way, and now they're going up this way. And then they come back to Bethel. Or no, a different group. Benjamin takes care of Bethel, right? But also, when they're up here, there's a verse in, I think it's verse 19, that says they're not able to clear everyone out up here because they have chariots of iron. Iron, like I said, is the new technology. If you have bronze and someone else has iron, you're going to lose to them unless you're very smart. And they lose because these people have chariots of iron. So they're able to clear out a good amount. I mean, this is a good amount of land to cover, right? Then you have Benjamin, who comes in and defeats Bethel, right? So it starts off, and it says, it starts off saying, okay, Judah and Simeon, they go to this town, then this town, then this town, then this town, then this town, this town. And then you have the next section. Okay, now let's talk about the other tribes. Benjamin goes to this town, and then this tribe doesn't do anything. This tribe doesn't do this. This tribe doesn't do this. This tribe doesn't do this. And then, so when you have verses 21 to 35, there's a shift. It was talking about the nation, the tribe Judah and Simeon doing a good job clearing out all these cities, but then it shifts and says, well, verse 21, the people of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. Verse 27, Manasseh did not drive out the inhabitants of Bethshean and its villages. Verse 29, Ephraim did not drive out the Canaanites. Verse 30. Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants of Kitron. Verse 31. Asher did not drive out the inhabitants. Verse 33. Naphtali did not drive out the inhabitants. You got verse 34. Dan is pressed back. Verse 35. The house of Joseph relied heavily on these other nations and put them to forced labor. So the chapter goes from Judah and Simeon drove out these people to all these other tribes did not drive out these people. And it names 7 out of the 10 tribes in the north. So down here is Judah and Simeon. We kind of already mentioned them. But now you have all of these different tribes. There's Dan, Benjamin, Ephraim, Manasseh, Zebulun, Naphtali, Asher. The only 3 not mentioned are Issachar, Gad, and Reuben. So, 7 out of 10 tribes failed to do what they were told to do by God. They were supposed to drive out these people, and they didn't. And the book of Judges is trying to really hit on this idea. They did not, they did not, they did not. In fact, some of them decided instead of driving them out, we're going to put them to forced labor. We're going to get some money out of it. And I think that's even worse, right? And so if you're reading this text, this is what it says. Benjamin did not drive out. Manasseh did not drive out. Ephraim did not drive out. Zebulun did not drive out. When the Bible repeats something, you're supposed to stop and look. And this is what they keep saying. And just so you know, here's plenty. The Bible also repeats what they were supposed to do. Exodus says, don't let them dwell in your land, right, lest they make you sin against me. In Numbers, it says if you don't drive them out, well, then they're going to be barbs in your eyes, thorns in your side. Deuteronomy says when you take the land, clear out, and it names the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. He says don't intermarry with them. They are going to take your sons from following me to serve other gods. Deuteronomy says drive them out and make them perish quickly. Joshua says, if you make marriages with them, know that God will not drive them out, and they're going to be a snare for you, a whip on your sides, thorns in your eyes. The nation of Israel was warned about this. They were told again and again and again, once you get into the promised land, clear them out. And if you don't, it's going to cause trouble for you. And that's exactly what happened. That under Joshua, they did good, but after Joshua passed, they got in the land, and they did not clear out the people. And you see kind of God's displeasure. It says, chapter 2, Now the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochum, and he said, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you into the land that I swore to give your fathers. I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land. You shall break down their altars. But you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? So now I say, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall become thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare to you. And as soon as the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the people of Israel, the people lifted up their voices and wept. And they called the name of that place Bochum, and they sacrificed there to the Lord. So this is God saying, I told you to do it, and you didn't do it, and so now I'm not going to help you get rid of them, and they're going to be trouble to you, just like I said they would. So let's take a second and ask. They were instructed over and over to clear out the nations. Why didn't they? Why didn't the people of Israel clear out these nations? Right. Right. Yeah, they said, you know, it's like the spies originally when they were going to take the land. They said they're big and mighty. We can't do it, right? There might be a little bit of fear there, saying, what if we lose, right? Clint?
To me, it's like in verse 3, it's an example. It says, so now I say, I will not drive them out before you. Previous to that, God was with the Israelites in the battles and drove the nations out. So the Israelites fought the battles, but God was with them, right? And so God was with them constantly doing that. It wasn't all on their own. And at some point, through whatever means, they disobeyed that, whether they thought, whether they saw the wealth in just basically here saying, messed up. You didn't do what I told you. It's like a parent. I mean, you tell your kids, don't do this, and they do it, and they suffer the consequences.
Yep.
So, and this is God saying, you're going to suffer the consequences now.
Great points. Yeah, because at the end of the day, it wasn't them who was winning the victory. It was God, you know. And that's a great analogy. You know, this is just like a parent saying, you didn't do what I said, and now you have to suffer the consequences. I mean, I think that's what God does with us a lot. He says, well, these are the consequences. You kind of made your bed, you have to lie in it, and you hope that they learn their lesson, you know. I was just trying to think of reasons. Kevin, go ahead. Right? Yeah, they're complacent. They're like, oh, we have our land. It's good enough, right? Bob?
Maybe after 7 years, they just got tired of the war.
Yeah.
Gave up, too easily. They didn't continue on.
Yeah, maybe after 7 years of war, they gave up. They didn't want to fight anymore. Yeah, for sure. These are the reasons that I found, and I think you guys have hit on several of them. Convenience. There were, I think it was twice in that section where the couple tribes, instead of driving out the nations, they put them to work. They made them slaves and forced labor. If you eliminate them, you lose the labor, you lose the tribute, you lose the workforce. But if you enslave them, well, I mean, economically speaking, that is the smart choice, but morally speaking, that was not the right choice. You had fear, right? And Kevin kind of mentioned this one. The tribe of Judah, they failed to bring out this, I forget what region it is. They failed to defeat a city because they had chariots of iron. But I think at the end of the day, chariots of iron are really not going to stop God, right? And so it reads more like they were intimidated. Lack of conviction, I think kind of like what Bob said. I mean, we've been fighting for 7 years. We're kind of tired of this, right? This is a new generation. The Joshua generation saw the Red Sea, the wilderness, the conquest victories. This next generation inherits the land, but not the struggle. Rob?
But you kind of just see how you're very kind of, you forget things that were in the past, you don't really remember. Here they remember, they had no chariots, no nothing. Yet the chariots that came behind them would have been highly advanced, and God took care of them.
Yep.
And now here comes chariots of iron, and you don't remember God took care of the last chariots they had.
That's a great point. Yep. God has taken care of chariots before. He'll take care of chariots again. And the fact that they are losing because of chariots doesn't quite make much sense. There has to be more to that story that, like we said, it's God who's winning the wars, not these guys. But go ahead.
This is really applicable. I've studied with people, and one of the things that either they know a little bit about the Bible first, or they don't, but eventually they come to this point where God basically told the Israelites annihilate a number of countries. And the question always comes up is, and it's not always a question, a lot of times it's a very concerning comment that people have, is that you mean the God that you're telling me that's a loving God, right, ordered the annihilation of countries, men, women, children, animals, everything. And so if we're not able to answer them and to have some constructive information for them, it can be a big walk for those people. And so,
Absolutely.
and maybe, I guess, out of this class, that would be a good thing for us to take, is that why did God do this? How did he have the authority to do this? How could he do this and still be a loving God? All those things are questions that really are very unsettling about
Agreed. Yeah, it is a very concerning thing, and as we read these passages, I think that is something that should come across our mind, because we do have to understand the full gravity of what God is commanding. Because when God said, "Wipe out the nations," I think we need to fully grasp what we're talking about, because He's not just talking about soldiers. God even said, "Don't even let the animals stay alive." Right? I mean, He meant everything, right? And that will be we should cover that at some point. So just kind of wrapping up. So this is my list for, why the nation of Israel may not have obeyed God, but I want to say one more thing. This list itself could easily be applied to ourselves and why we don't obey God, right? What are the reasons that we don't obey God? Maybe because it's inconvenient. Maybe because we're afraid. Do we lack conviction? Maybe because we've already been exposed and influenced by people who around us who don't obey God. Maybe we just don't see the danger in sin. Maybe we settle for the partial obedience. We say, well, I've done a little bit, isn't that enough? And maybe part of the reason that we're struggling in our life is because God's allowing the consequences to teach us, right? And so I think the book of Judges is a wonderful study in failure to obey. And as we look at the nation of Israel itself and ask, why aren't they obeying? We need to look at ourselves and ask that same question. So next week, we're going to talk a little bit about the sin cycle, about, just going through it real fast. Israel falls into sin. God is angry and he sends an oppressor. Israel is sorrowful and cries out to God. God sends a judge, which is a warrior and a leader. Israel goes to war. God gives victory to Israel. Israel praises God for the victory. Israel has peace and gets comfortable, and then back to Israel falls into sin. And through the book, I think it was 6 times you're going to see this cycle, unfortunately. And as we read the book of Judges, I think we should be asking ourselves, how do we break this cycle in our own life? How do we break this cycle in our own generations? And I hope that we learn a little bit of why we and people tend to fail to obey God, and we can prevent that. Bob?
I was just thinking it would have been, to me, it would have been easier if God had just created a plague before they entered Canaan and just wiped all the people out.
It would have, yeah.
And it would have been an easy way to do it, but obviously that wasn't God's plan.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. God, the Israelites really didn't have to go to war. God, like you said, God could have created a plague to wipe out the people who were already living in Canaan. So it's a fair question to ask, why didn't he do that? All right, thank you for being here this morning.